Hello, welcome to the February 9th, 2024 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you've not attended a livestream before, I'm just going to check something here real quick on my computer. Seems like my screen that I see in front of you is not what's going on, so let me just check my system preferences. Bear with me just for a moment. All right, it seems like my display that I'm showing here is not what is on the monitoring computer. So let me see if I can get this figured out quickly. Usually it just mirrors my screen, and I'm looking at the monitoring computer, and it's not reflecting that. So let me just check. All right, so it's not showing what we're seeing on the screen isn't what's on my screen. So let me see if I exit out of Cubase here quickly. If we see this reflected, bear with me just for a moment. I'm so sorry. Okay, so I think we are close. Bear with me. Sorry about this. Almost there. We'll see if this is getting started. All right, so I think we're okay now. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. This is the February 9th, 2024 Club Cubase live stream. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can submit questions in advance to clubcubase at steinberg.de, or you can simply ask questions in the live chat field. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're using, which version, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, that information would be helpful. Also, if you could specify which version number, so if you're running Cubase 11, Cubase 12, Cubase 13, and which operating system, we should have an index of all topics covered in the live stream today pinned to the top of the comments field. Several hours after the live stream ends. If you wanted to search for topics been covered in previous live streams, I think we're over 31,000 topics. You could go to Club Cubase at Steinberg, or you go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. So cubaseindex.com, and you could just kind of do a search and look for a particular topic, and it'll take you right to that moment in the live stream where we've discussed it. We could also want to give a special thanks to two people as service moderators, to Agent K and Jazz Dude. And also we want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord. Once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from outside of Alexandria, Virginia. I'm from Alexandria, Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. So if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. Sorry about the video problems at the very beginning there. My apologies. All right. So we see from Kevin, please discuss new features in Wavelab 12 Pro. So, there's probably 80 pages of new features. My favorite one is going to be the ability to run Wavelab as like an ARA extension. So if we wanted to easily do editing on a file and migrate back and forth between Cubase, Nuendo, and Wavelab, what we could do here is just go to extensions, and now we could just run, since Wavelab 12, when I double click and we go into the sample editor, we can now just have access to the Wavelab editing environment directly here. So, that way if I make a change in this particular, if I want to do spectrum analyzing, spectrum work, correction, processing, all of my kind of typical Wavelab editing tasks, that we could now just simply launch this as an ARA extension. So we're running kind of the Wavelab audio editor directly inside of Cubase, and all of these changes are synchronized. So there's lots of other amazing new features that come with Wavelab, some new processing, then some of the new plugins that you see coming with directly with Cubase, such as the new Pultec style EQs. If we have a file, let me just find something just to kind of show you. Something with some stereo files in it. So I'll just do a new project here and create empty. And there's some really wonderful ways of kind of looking at your audio in new perspectives. So let me just import a quick audio file here. All right, so if we have a 2-track file, one of the things that we could do is, again, we will just select this. Let's go into my Wavelab via ARA. Now when we double click, we could also look at how if we want to see like the left versus like the mid side representation in the waveform. So if we wanted to take the sides and edit those independently. But there's also, one of my favorite things is this new rainbow audio. So when we look at the waveforms, we could actually have this kind of colorized based on specific frequencies. So if I had something that was set up that was maybe like a Sibilance file, this is like really handy for this. So I'll just import a file that has some Sibilance in it. Just to show this feature. So now when I want to run this inside of Wavelab, obviously Wavelab runs as standalone, but being able to also, now when we look at a particular file here, we could see just based on the colors which particular frequencies are sibilant. So the yellow colors, and there's different presets that you could have for the rainbow settings. So So at this point, you could choose your different frequency presets that you could have access to as well. So, but being able to also, if we copy part of a file here, I could just say, let's copy just that particular file, that we could also just paste it in directly into Wavelab. So as we come over here, open up a fresh project inside of Wavelab. Wavelab now has kind of like project folders so that everything can be consolidated into one particular file. So let's say I want to, at this point, we want to go to the audio editor, and we'll create empty, and now I could just paste my audio files. So we'll just say, okay, we want to create a new audio file, and so we could just copy and paste directly from Cubase to Wavelab as well. So all sorts of wonderful new things. There's also, when you're in the montage, you have a null track for being able to do more quality assurance testing, different loudness tools, so that you could have uniform loudness and deliver different loudness standards to different delivery formats as well. So it's a couple of new things, but you can check out more detail on the particular Wavelab new videos as well. All right. So we have Michael Marshall checking in from Somerset, UK, Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Benny from Sweden. All right. So we see Chris just ask, when will Cubase support 4K video support? I like the editing capabilities in that Cubase offers, but only being able to export video in 1080p is really disappointing. So let me know, and I think we mentioned this in the last live stream, that if you have a particular video file, so say if I have a video file, so even most of our composers are still getting everything in 1080p for delivery for their composition. But if we wanted to do this, when we go to export, try just to come over here, and when you do your export video, and as we mentioned before, try to use the replace audio in video function here, and that should keep it at the same resolution that the original video is in to start with. All right, so we have the artist known as Love checking in from New York. Great to see you. All right, so we have Language of Thought. I keep having issues with Melodyne 5 Studio as an extension into Cubase 13 Pro and Windows 10. Keeps happening. I open a project and find all my Melodyne edits gone, latest version used. So I don't have a license of Melodyne on this machine, but I've done some, of like a few Melodyne edits just for testing purposes on my studio machine. I haven't come across anything that's been lost with kind of the ARA capabilities. But maybe if someone else has as well. But I didn't do extensive testing, but everything seemed to kind of work as expected when opening up projects later on my personal machine. All right, great to see Val checking in from Vienna. All right, so we see, can you just do a series of tutorials for beginners? So I probably have like 200 or 300 tutorials that are on the Cubase YouTube channel. So there's lots of tutorials oriented for beginners. So look at, if you go to, youtube.com/Cubase and look through all of like the Q&A videos, look through all of the videos. So there's several hundred videos, and a lot of them are really kind of designed for beginners as use. All right, so we see John Costigan checking in from Wisconsin. See also, or just put a couple hours Cubase masterclass. So there are lots of, check out the live streams, and again, use Cubase Index to search if you have like particular topics. I also have a PDF file that I'm willing to share. Anyone that wants to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de which has links where you could search the PDF file as well and just simply do that. But we do we get considered these as master classes where you get any question you want answered. So any questions that you have, please feel free to ask, and we're happy to answer them here for you, whether you're an advanced user or a beginner. All right, so we have Pair T Komunen checking in from Finland. Thanks for joining. All right, so we see, hey, I'm trying to get Cubase 12 output to play into OBS on my Mac and PC so I could stream on Twitch. I can't seem to make it work. Can you help? So a lot of times it could depend upon your audio interface, could be the real culprit here. So like I have just a quick, like a Steinberg UR24 interface, and this was just updated in the last week. So if we wanted to go to like the control panel for the audio interface. So my one single URC interface we could have set up for, this will show up like when I go to output audio, I could just, and this is a function of the hardware. So, Cubase is going to be able to capture that audio out. So if you don't want to use two different devices for my live streams, for years I've used one interface for Cubase, one for the live stream. But here I could have one single UR24C interface, and I could say, okay, I want, and this will show up as basically 3 different interfaces. So this is really more of a hardware routing issue, how the hardware routes, if it has a loopback function. But here I could have my Cubase go out to my UR24C. I could, when I'm in the streaming mode here, I could send like to OBS or to Twitch or Zoom, whatever, Teams meeting, and then you could set the output to the other application to UR24 streaming. So even though it's the same device, I could take my audio, my microphone that's connected here, take the audio going out of the DAW output port, and then we could have the streaming go directly to the streaming service. And if you wanted to even bring in a different, I need to play audio from Cubase, I need to play audio from YouTube, and then send it all out to the streaming device. So even though it's one device, it could be shared multiply in 3 different scenarios. So it's kind of one single device can show up as 3 separate devices. So it's really a function of your hardware that could be preventing you from doing that. All right. All right. So we have Trond from Norway joining us. All right, and we have Fearin Yo just saying hello from Sweden. I'm using hello from Sweden. I'm using Cubase Pro 12. Thanks for another live stream. You see a question. All right, so I don't see the question. Maybe if you could ask the question again, we get to it. Okay, I think I see it now. All right, so his question is, if I move audio events just a little to the left or right without snap-on, Cubase corrects, moves back the event. So I need to move it again. Is there any way to shut off auto correction off? Okay, so let's say I have this event, and right now it's snapping to the beat. All right, so if I hit J, which should turn the snap off, now I could just freely place it anywhere that I want. So we can see right here is the grid without snap turned on. Then when, it won't snap based on the grid. So when snap is disabled, I could freely move this piece anywhere. When it's turned on, I can just simply have that snap to the grid. So it should be, make sure you hit the letter J, and that should turn off allow you to place the events without aligning or locking to the grid. And then when you hit J, and we see that just the snap is turned on right here, that at that point it snaps. So let me know if yours is doing differently. And you say without snap on, it corrects, moves back. But I don't have that on mine. All right, let me just scroll back. All right, wonderful to see Rick Ballantyne. Hey, Greg, if I render out a Dolby Atmos mix, will that be compatible with standard 5.1 deliverables, Netflix, etc., or is that a dedicated Atmos deliverable? Can you explain? So when we export like an ADM file, so if we go to the project and we go through the ADM authoring and we choose to export an ADM file, that's going to be different than a dedicated 5.1 file. So 5.1 will be channel based. So this audio source that's panned here will always go to the left, will always go to the center, always go to the right, or left, right surround, or LFE. So they're dedicated outputs. When we have an ADM file is different in that it's not channel based, it's object based. So this object, so we could think of like an audio file as being an object that can travel around a room. Now with Dolby Atmos, you may have 60 speakers in a theater. You may be listening to it in a 9.16, a 714, a 712, a 5.1, a quad, a stereo, a mono source. So what Atmos does is it will move that object and place its positioning based on whatever particular listening format is currently being used. So if it is, if you mixed it in 714 and you're listening to it in stereo, it's going to kind of fold down so that it works in stereo. Or if you're listening to it on your phone, it will fold down all of the panning positions so that it could be heard on the phone. So, so Atmos and ADM files can dynamically change to match, to play in the correct monitoring position, monitoring configuration of speakers. Whereas if you play a 5.1 file in a stereo, you're going to only hear the left and right channel. So that's channel based versus object based. So, if you wanted to deliver in 5.1, theoretically a lot of studios like Dolby Atmos because it could theoretically, fill all different channel configurations without having to have separate audio files. Now, if it does that super successfully, I don't know, a lot of my mix engineer friends are doing really high-end Atmos projects that feel that the stereo fold down is what the stereo mix is that maybe they built the Atmos mix from. So there's different schools of thought with that. If it's actually properly taking something that was supposed to be spherical and, moving up and down around your head, and if that is conveyed correctly to stereo or mono playback environments, a lot of people don't feel that it is. That's kind of the benefit of the ADM, is that it can scale to the playback system, whereas a dedicated 5.1 will always be working at 5.1, and then you could do different downmix presets to listen to it. So ADM and 5.1 are going to be two separate file formats. All right. And wonderful to see Rick on. He's a wonderful composer based in Charlotte. All right. Always great to see Mark Rabin from Montana. He's on with his dog Stella. So everyone say woof to Stella. All right, we see David M. checking in from Liverpool. All right, so Dallas LaRue asks, I thought I seen you one time drag an audio sample up into an instrument track or MIDI track and have the MIDI notes in place. Can't figure out how to do that. So maybe it was if we had a drum loop. So it might have been with the sampler track. And so let's say if I have my sampler track open and I drag an audio file into the sampler track and I create slices. So now that I've created slices, we have a new sampler track. I could drag this particular, so I'm going to take this particular MIDI file and drag it over, and now we could have the slices automatically be conveyed from the MIDI loop. So it could be, and we could do similar functions in Groove Agent where we could slice, and then basically what each of these would do is when we go to the sampler track and go to the sampler control, is that we could take these particular, and at that point we could just say each slice that has been created is now triggered on its own particular MIDI note. So let me know if that's what you saw, Dallas. And it's great to have you on. Wonderful to see Matt Elston on. Thanks for joining us today. All right, Pedro asks from Buenos Aires. I have a problem to open a file with invalid file message. I have Cubase 13 Pro, and the file originally was created under Cubase 12 Pro. Is this issue because I switched PC? So, generally the file formats open up freely. If there's like particular maybe functions used that it's in one computer that's not in another computer, you might get some messages like that, but generally the files can open up. If you do have an invalid project, one thing that you could do is go to, let's say we do a new project, and we could go to your file menu, and we will say import tracks from project. So I want to come over here, we'll say I want to do tracks from this project. We could choose to select all or deselect all. So say I want these particular tracks. We could say we want the events and parts. And at this point, we could include the channel and inspector settings. So I could just come over here, hit OK, and now we could basically import all of the tracks into a new file without having to open the project. So once again, try going to File menu to import tracks from project. And as you go to tracks from project from there, select the project that is corrupt. Come over here and you could select all of the tracks. And if you have problems doing that, try just selecting a few tracks at a time, and you might be able to isolate exactly which track is causing problems. But try that, and you could probably get all of the data from the projects loaded into a brand new project. All right, we have Spa Dogs sending greetings from Canada. Thanks for joining us. Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Glad you could be on. All right, you see Mark Raven and Stella are both happy to be on. All right, so we have the Echo Park projects and Carlo Lopez from Los Angeles. Thanks for being on. All right, so Tony Trunzo asks, hi Greg, where can I find tutorials for VST Live, please? So there are a number of tutorials, so let's just take a quick look. I think if we go to I think it's maybe under Steinberg Media. Let's see if that's where they are. So you can see, you walk through live, VST live, what's new in 1.4. So if you go to the main Steinberg YouTube channel, so just go to youtube.com/Steinberg, and there's lots of other entry-level Cubase tutorials there as well. So, but you could just see a lot of the VST live tutorials just right there. So there are a number of them. I've seen them. Guy did a nice job with them. All right, so we have Yash just saying, hey, Greg. So welcome to the live stream. Glad you can make it today. All right, so we see from Farron just says, it's like Cubase thinks the first time I moved the event, it was a mistake, so it moves it back to the old position. So even when I come here, make sure, one, as you're doing it, that there's no lock on it. So maybe like you have an event that's locked on the track, or that is locked here. So, you can maybe lock the position or size, but it seems like, as I want to move the events here freely, let me know if I'm doing something differently, that if snap is turned off, I can place it anywhere I want. And then when snap is enabled, that it snaps to the grid. So let me know if I'm doing something differently than you, Farron. All right, so we have Stefan from Sweden saying hello. All right. Thanks for joining us. Always great to see Nick from Essex in the UK. Uno Momento joining us from band practice. So he's just going to hit the like button, but welcome from Finland. Hope you're doing well. All right, so we have Mike Goodman says he's nobody from New York. Well, if you're on the live stream, you're somebody, and thanks for joining us. All right, we see Michael Teams is proactively distributing virtual ice cream. All right, so we see from Mr. 1000, how can I print my work on a computer? So if you want to print out like the music notes, like notation, if we come over here, let's say, just open up a project that has some MIDI in it. All right, so if I wanted to print this out, we could come over, let's go to our scores menu, and we'll see our page mode. And now at this point, we could just go to your file menu to print, and we could just print directly out that particular score. If you wanted to see more parts and create multiple parts, just simply select them in the score editor. So you say, okay, I wanted to see my Mellotron flute and my piano part. So now when I go into the score editor, we could see the different parts automatically laid out for us. And then again, just come over here and choose to print score. Then you can print out your parts for musicians to read. All right, wonderful to see Razel checking in from Denmark. Glad you could make it today. All right, so you see from Kevin, hi Greg, can you go and see in Wavelab 12 Pro about Amos Moses, your track cover, and the lever, what color is it? What color is peak color in Wavelab 12 Pro? Please explain. All right, so let's say we'll open up Wavelab here. All right, so we just, all right, so I don't have a 2-track, but it says your track cover and see the lever, what color. So let's say if we're, so if we wanted to do, again, if we come over to the metadata at this point, we could edit the metadata and see kind of, if we go to the ID3 iTunes, here we could import, your track picture. So if you wanted to import the picture right there, you could do it just right there and upload the particular picture. All right, it says, see the lever. What color is a peak color in Wavelab 12 Pro? So it could depend. So if you're using kind of the new rainbow here, you could kind of see it for a particular frequency. So it doesn't. But if we wanted to, let's take a look and see if we see. If we do based on. So we could also see ranges with high dynamics. So if we wanted to make the high dynamic area, so once we have the rainbow, we could also kind of bring out the red colors to indicate where the loud peaks are within the particular audio file, just kind of seeing that visually there. So, and there's all sorts of different, so you'll have your kind of frequency metering here. So as we are playing along,
with a smile on my face.
So if you want to see our meters here for loudness meters, as well as dB.
That I'm looking forward to. It's not
and of course we could.
Me, it's just the time really flew. And it's getting faster every day.
And you can open up your supervision meter here as well. So if you want to see.
Some say die young and pretty. I'll let the dreamer make that case.
And while we're here also in Wavelab, if you go to correction, you could, so if you want to see kind of from a metering perspective, but if we want to come over here, we could just have it automatically detect all errors that could be peaks. And then Wavelab could point out any areas in the program material that do have errors. So at this point, you could just automatically search for different corrections. So you can see, okay, the number of errors, you can see the length. We could see different functions for how those errors will be shown as well. So let me know if that helps, Kevin. Okay. All right, wonderful to see Capped Energy Music from Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us. Great to have you on live. All right, great to see Michael Pierce has made it earlier. All right. All right, so we have a question from Steve Green. It says, hi, Greg. Is there a way of placing a signature tempo without it snapping to the grid, i.e., free float and choose anywhere on the audio event. So I'm not sure if it's a tempo or if it's a signature, but signatures are always going to be kind of contingent upon. So if I come into this project and let's add a signature track. So say we're at 4/4. So, at this point we would define the signature, and it's not like we say, okay, right here where this event starts, we put in a signature, so the signature kind of has to align to the musical grid because we're choosing to have, 4 beats of, we have 4 quarter notes within a bar. So the while we can put tempo maps freely anywhere to match, the time signature, just by kind of its nature, will, be aligned to the grid. So, when I put a measure in, if I wanted to put in a 4/4 bar here, let's say in the middle of the bar, and I'd say, okay, I can't put in a 4/4 bar because that would make this a 2/4 bar. So if I say, okay, let's make this a 2/4 measure, then I can say right here, I want it to be a 4/4 measure. So I can't necessarily put a 4/4 starting on beat 2 of a measure. I would have to have a 1/4 measure followed by a 4/4 measure. So that's how kind of time signatures work. So once we're defining the number of beats and what the pulse of the beat is, that's kind of for the entire thing. So we don't necessarily put, signatures are kind of inherently tied to the grid, but if you wanted to, move the events or move the measures themselves, if we go, so let's say I want, measure 4 here to start, what we could do is move the grid by using the warp tool. So we can say, let's warp grid. And I can say measure 4 is going to, just turn on my tempo track here real quick. So say measure 4 is actually going to, I'll just show the tempo track. So now what we can do is measure 4 needs to start here. And now we could move the bar with the signature track anywhere that we want. And measure 5 needs to be here. Measure 6 needs to be kind of right at this downbeat here. So we can move the bars, but the time signature will inherently always be on a grid, but the grid is matching the bars, and we could warp the bars just by coming over here and choosing warp grid. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, we see Michael Pierce is still learning in a traffic jam. So hopefully you're not driving and watching YouTube, but all right, Steve Green also asks, is there a free-floating, the ARA version of spectral layers tend to have a vertical window, not horizontal? So if we, let's say if we're doing spectral editing, so I'll come over, and if we wanted that in a separate window, now what I could do, so by default it will, when we double click, it'll go into the lower zone, but if I click this little arrow, to point right now, this is a free floating window, but still within the ARA editing environment. And we could click on the little arrow down to have that automatically go back into the lower zone. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Steve. All right, so we see a question from DJFK. Master a tune in Wavelab or Cubase? So it really could depend upon what your definition of mastering is. So if you think of mastering as just applying like plug-in processing on an entire file, then you could do that easily in Cubase. If we think of mastering as I want to take 10 songs, make them all sound coherent together, I want to work on the spacing between those files, so that, and I want to be able to deliver that to multiple formats with one click. I want to be able to, do different effects processing because one song may be a little brighter or darker than the other. I need all of my metadata for track indexes. I need CD text. I need all the metadata so that's going to show up on streaming services. I want it to automatically, deliver for the loudness specifications for different streaming services. Then Wavelab is a perfect tool. So if you just want to do a a quick processing on your entire mix, Cubase could do that. Some people call that mastering. A lot of mastering engineers wouldn't consider that mastering, and all the stuff that they do to compile, get the metadata, to get the consistency, to work with different versions. Like maybe you want to do a version without vocals. You want to do a version with vocals up 1/10 of a dB, down 1/10 of a dB, but keep all of the different files the same, with the same layout, with the fades, so that you're kind of listening to an entire album. Then Wavelab is a better solution for that. All right. All right, so Jack Bourne says, just saying hi. Always appreciate these. So thanks for joining and saying hi. Okay, so Drano Corleone, great name. How can I add blank audio to multiple tracks at the same time, including MIDI and audio? Okay, so let's say if I want to do space at the beginning here. So let's say I have a number of tracks. I'm going to hold down, I'm going to grab the range selection tool here. And I select a range. So now that I have a range selected wherever that range is, I'm going to go to my edit menu to range. And then we could just say insert silence. And that will move everything over to the right. So we could set kind of the range here. So if I want to do this at the beginning of the file, so hold down Control or Command plus the Shift key, that will globally select all of the different events, and this will include signature, automation, tempo. If you have it set for divide track list, you may, and you have events that you want to be inserted, just disable divide track list. And now I could again go to edit, to range, and insert silence, and that will just kind of shift everything over, and you can see it even includes the automation, tempo information, just like that. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, great to see Braxel on from Texas. All right, and we have Darren Flake on. Thanks for joining us again today. All right, so we see from Yash Das, Yash asks, how do I edit velocity, note position, etc. of all MIDI notes in multiple MIDI clips on the same and different channel? All right, so let's say I have multiple clips here. All right, so so just open up my lower zone editor again. So I'm going to hold down Shift and double click so we can see all of these. I'm going to now come over, we'll just say all parts on the active track. All right, so I'm going to come here. So I'm going to select a track. And all right, so just so we'll just say open key editor. So right now I have it in the lower zone. So if we just select, so I think if we come over here, we could select all parts on the track. So, or if you just then now if we wanted to adjust, let's see if we could just adjust. So we can see that the velocity for all of the events are adjusting here. So if we just all that are selected, so I could just Control Command A, we could adjust the velocity. Let's adjust the position. So I could say let's adjust their start position, their end position, etc. So you could just come right over here and adjust from the info line. So just doing a Command Control A, and then you could just do your velocity and positioning editing. All right, Steve Green asks, one more, Greg. I can hear Club Cubase right now, but I can't hear Cubase at the same time. Can you show me how to hear both at the same time? Thanks. So it could really depend on your audio interface and how it deals with that. But in Cubase, you could try coming over here to the studio setup. From the studio menu, select audio system, and try to release ASIO driver when the application is in the background. Some audio interfaces will automatically kind of work, at the same time simultaneously, and like how we showed that the URC interface, we could have basically 3 different drivers for a single interface and control the volume levels. So it could really depend on your audio interface, but try going to your studio menu to studio setup and try toggling the release driver when application is in background. Okay. Okay, so we see kind of further question. Sorry, maybe gotten ahead. I know that I could select the MIDI clips and transpose and change the master velocity range, but I'd like to do this in the MIDI editor. Okay, so I think we showed that, Yash. Let me know if that works for what you saw. Okay, so Drano Corleone just says, thanks, but I want to add blank audio or blank areas so all tracks start at the beginning of the song. Example, exporting stems to make sure everything aligns when importing. So if we come here, so I mean, one other method of doing this, if you want to have, like, if we go to your project setup, so let's go to your project menu to project setup, and here you can see, if you wanted to have space before, so let's say I'll come over here, everything is starting at measure 1. So if I wanted to have space, I could hit Shift plus the letter Shift plus the letter S, and I could just say, give me 2 bars of display offset, and it says you have modified the bar offset. Do you want to keep the project content at bar positions? We'll say yes. So now I could have a negative measure 1, a measure 0, and then everything starts at measure 1 directly there. So, but generally, I think when you export, there's not going to be any issues of getting everything aligned when importing them. So, but let me know if that's helpful for you, Drano. All right, Braxel says, Greg, not sure if you remember about my email to you about those graphic artifacts of the photo Cubase 13, but I still have them. Any other suggestions on how to get rid of them? So there was a hotfix on Windows for 13.021, which seemed to have resolved a lot of the issues for lots of people. and includes some settings for like an NVIDIA graphics cards, I believe. So make sure that you are running to 13.021. It was a hotfix, but that seemed to help for a lot of the people. All right. All right, so you see from Kevin Mehmed says, is it limitless, the number of foot switches, pedals in Line 6 Helix native owned by Steinberg Yamaha? I can't figure out how to make and save import presets in Helix native latest version. So I don't have, it is, Line 6 is in the Yamaha family of brands, but if we come directly, I don't have a Helix plugin. I have one on my personal computer. I don't have one on my work computer here. But it seems like it should be how to make and save import presets. So, generally with any plugin, it may have its own kind of preset configuration. So let's say if I come and we'll just throw in like a virtual amp rack here, VST amp rack. So let's say if we have pedals and we built kind of our pedal chain, like our pedal board here. All right, so with any plugin that's kind of a VST3 plugin, you should be able to click right up here, and this is kind of standard for the plugin, and then just try saving the preset there. Some plugins may have their own preset, hierarchy or organization. So, but you could just simply save the preset right there as part of the VST3 specification. So give that a try, Kevin. All right, so we see Darren Flake. Hi, did a parallel processing on vocal. They've been sent to buses to have process on them with third-party plugins, etc. Now the vocals are delayed because of the process, how to calculate it in Cubase. So generally, if it's going to be software plugins, it's automatically calculated. So I'm not sure if you're doing it in real time. It's not going to do real-time delay compensation, but any file. So let's say I'll just play this file and I'll do parallel processing on the vocal here. So I'll revert this. So it's not going to do it like on real-time monitoring because of physics. But, so let's take this vocal here.
We played our records into the night.
So I'm going to create two buses, two group tracks. Okay, I'm going to make them stereo. Now let's come over here. All right, so I'm going to go to my sends. And let's send it to group 3 to group 4. Okay, so I'm going to come over here, set them to the same levels. So now we play this.
I turn it up, you wouldn't mind.
All right, so now they're in parallel, so I want to do processing on this one. So let's say on this track, I will just run the black valve compressor.
Up until now, that was okay. Guess all along I was so naive.
And then I'll put something.
Now you're packing boxes,
That has
ready to leave.
More.
Our musical history.
So let's say we go to our multi-band
on the
compressor here.
floor. I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours. 'Cause now you're asking Beatles or Stones. Something about that just sounds so wrong.
All right, so you see
But
that.
it's do it away to start a
It's our original file.
Take the records that you like. Please stop asking Beatles or Stones.
Let's say in this track, I just also want to put
Just leave
some
it
highs.
Oh.
So even though these are, like, when we look at our delay chain of processing, we can say that this group has 123 milliseconds of delay. This group has 0 milliseconds of delay since there's no processing on it. It's still playing back perfectly in time.
We played our records into the night.
So whatever processing I add
I
to
turn
this
it
channel,
up, you wouldn't mind.
it's automatically compensated for. If you're doing it in real time, like a parallel processing while you're monitoring the audio, that will have delay. If your plugins have delay, we can't get around that. It's physics. But if it's in the mix, you're not going to have any, the latency is automatically compensated for. If you're using external outboard gear and it's configured as an external effects here. So let's say, okay, I have a distressor. What you would do is just say, okay, on this, I'm going to add an external processor as an insert. And then you could actually measure the delay. So if it's outboard gear, you could measure delay that will ping the outboard signal path and will automatically compensate for that. So if it's tracks that are already playing back, it's compensated for. You don't have to do anything. If you're trying to record with parallel processing, generally it's not a good idea. You will hear delays if, depending on the plugins that you're using. So. Okay. Okay, so you see videos frozen from Marlin, but it seems to be working for other people. Thanks for letting me know, though. All right, so we see from Darren Flake says, how to align or know the delay in milliseconds to sync it properly or try to follow the MS reading on a channel the Cubase shows, but it's not fixing the issue. It's still off. So, if you could specify, Darren, if it's, during, live tracking and monitoring or if it's for playback. But, as you just saw, it's just kind of worked as expected for me. All right, great to see Suede TV and Recording Studio. Thanks for being on. All right, so we see a question. So what's the solution for using my PC headphone slot without interface? Most of the time it's only one side working, no output at all. So usually when it's, not, if it's one output that's working, it is a incorrect cable, so check to make sure that your cable, is the correct cable. So usually you're using kind of like an 1/8 inch mini jack. So when you do that, if you're on Windows, you would just have to come over, you would see like the for the audio system, you would probably choose, like on a Mac, you would choose built-in audio. On Windows, you would probably choose generic low latency ASIO. Once you're there, go to the control panel and make sure that you actually are being sent out of the headphones. But, check your headphone cable to make sure that it's a stereo cable. So a lot of times when people are only hearing one side from their headphones, it's that the cable that they're connecting to is a mono cable and not a stereo cable. So if you have a chance to try different cables with that, so usually it's going to be an 1/8" mini jack that's on the laptop. Make sure it's pushed all the way in. Otherwise, you could only get one channel. So. All right, Cooper Jan asks, hey, how can I save different sample loops in musical mode so I can later download them in a new project mix? So, the loops themselves aren't saved in musical mode or not musical mode. It's how it's imported into the project, whether it is in musical mode or not. So let's say if I want to come here, I'll just let's add an audio track. The tempo information can automatically be applied to the track. So let's say I'll call this track tempo stamp. Okay, so as I come over here, I'll just record some audio on that track. We can see my tempo is set to 80 beats a minute. And let me just go to my connections. Okay, so right now we have a recording. All right, let me just.
Laid out on the floor, I've got to choose.
All right, so we record in.
What's mine and what's yours?
All right, so we go to look in the pool, Control or Command plus the letter P, and we'll say, okay, we're going to go to our tempo stamp, and we can see that this is automatically embedded as a metadata as 80 beats a minute. If you want to change that, you could just modify it right here, but as you record into Cubase, at that point it's going to be tempo stamped. But when you go to drag it into a project, if it is set up, I think if we come over here to our loops and samples and we have it set to align beats to project into preview, and we drag that over, that will then be placed into musical mode. If that is turned off, let's drag this to an audio file here, let's say on a different track. So if I drag it here, that musical mode is turned off. So it's really like if you're dragging and dropping from the media bay, the tempo information will be is automatically embedded in the files as they're recorded. But if you have a line beats on, then when we drag an event in, it's in musical mode. With that turned off, we drag the same file in to the same track, then musical mode is turned off. So this determines whether the event is in musical mode or not, is just by this setting in Media Bay when we go to drag it in. So the tempo information is already there. So, we can't necessarily save a file in musical mode per se, but we could give all the metadata so that when musical mode is activated, that it will respond and react correctly. All right, so we have a question from Spa Dogs. Is there a way to organize expression maps in Nuendo? All right, so let's take a look. So let me just open up something that has. So it kind of shows up as kind of one huge list. I think, I know that development teams and planning teams are kind of aware of the issue. But when we come here to, let's say, our expression maps, when we go to the expression map setup, we can see all of the available expression maps that are within the project. So we could have that set accordingly there. But once we have the expression map loaded in the track, so you may see a big list there, but once we have the particular expression map and we double click, at this point we could just say, okay, I'm going for my violin, and now I only see that particular expression map. And a lot of people will have this saved within their particular template, so that anytime they go to this track, it will always be the correct expression map that's loaded for that particular instrument. So, but when we look at it in the expression maps, we'll see just kind of a really long list here. We realize that if you have 4,000 tracks, that list could be a little unmanageable, but you could just pick the one particular expression map at a time and then save that within your template, and then you're only seeing the expression map for that particular track. All right, so Kevin Mehmed just says, can I request there be a live stream for Wavelab 12 Pro and Helix Native, mostly more? Can you do that for me and install Helix Native on your work computer? Thanks, Greg. So I'll see if I can get a license for Helix Pro on my work computer. But there already was a Wavelab 12 live stream that came out like January 15th or something like that. So you could look for that. All right, Steve Green asks, in Groove Agent 5, view from the front, I drag C0 into a new track, but it plays back A-sharp 0 and doesn't play A-sharp 0 as a fill, but another random pattern. Okay, so we'll just start here. I'll do a new project. Okay, so let's go ahead and load it up. Okay, so say I have now different fills. So say there's my fill, my pattern. Okay, so now what I want to do, let's come over and let's say I want to start at C0. Okay, so I'm going to let me just adjust my bar offset. Okay, so I'm going to create an event. Okay, so we want it to be at C0 to play this pattern. And let's say I want it to be A sharp 0. And let me just change my snap here. All right, so now as we listen to this, all right, and I'll just kind of continue this part. Let's go to a different pitch. So I'll do a different pattern here. So let's say I want this to be And we'll make this A. And we do this, we'll say back to C0. All right, so now I'll just go to play. So we're basically taking these MIDI notes that are triggering the different, so these MIDI notes will trigger these particular patterns. So as we listen to it here, we'll have our first, so C sharp, then it's going to go to A sharp for our fill, then back to E0, then I think it's going to do a fill at A, back to C sharp. So one thing that could be, if you have Groove Agent in play mode, this could be playing while it's being triggered. So make sure that this is in stop mode. And also make sure you don't have follow transport on, because this could play its own internal sequencer. So we could think of Groove Agent as having its own sequencer. If we want that, if I want this pattern to just follow the transport, so if I'm just kind of writing, I could come over here, and as I hit play and stop, this will follow our transports like that. But if we have these events are triggering the patterns, we want to make sure that this is not, play is not enabled and follow transport is not enabled. So again, we play back the pattern, it'll now do the fill. Do this fill. And then stop right where that particular MIDI note goes. And if I want this to do an ending at that point, let's see, looks like A sharp 1. So as we play this, we can now, have it do its fill, play the pattern, and then do an ending pattern. Just like that. Now, one other thing to check if you're still having issues is when you click here, you can see Omni mode. So, and what you could do now is just kind of, you could have a separate port that's just for patterns versus a port that will play back. So depending on the kits, you may have, sounds like notes that are, it's possible to have, notes that are triggering patterns and notes that are used in instruments. And if you wanted to have patterns be on a completely different MIDI port, try clicking this icon here. And that will create a separate MIDI port for the patterns and a separate MIDI port for the drum sounds that play. So let me know if that helps. All right, so we see from, says, Dear Greg, I have big MIDI controlling issues. This is a situation, sorry for my English, greets from Brussels. So maybe we'll see. It's from Mr. Roach. All right. Okay, so the first question is how to set my faders for MIDI CC1, CC11, CC64 for modulation. I could play CC modulations, but they are not recorded, replayed. So make sure, one, if you have your faders that are being used for MIDI remote, you don't need to use those for a MIDI remote. So one, find out what particular MIDI CC. So when you come over to a device, so let's say I have my all MIDI inputs, I have like an 8-channel fader box here. I'm going to go into my MIDI monitor. So we'll go to a MIDI insert. And here we have a plugin that's a MIDI monitor. So I could just come over and let me see if we have this. All right, so when I click here, I could see that this fader is transmitting MIDI CC11. This is transmitting MIDI CC1. Okay, so ideally within your device, instead of transmitting it, changing the incoming MIDI data from the input transformer, try changing it in the device that's actually transmitting it. So just about every MIDI controller, you can set what MIDI CC is actually being sent from the fader. If you can't change that, that's the best solution for that. If you can't change that, that's when you could utilize the input transformer. So let's say I want to take controller 11 and I want to transform MIDI controller 11 into MIDI controller 21, for example. So I would just put this on the track level. Let's open up the panel, and I'm going to say we're going to activate our, and we want to choose, we're going to transform, and we're going to say type is equal to controller, and then we'll say our MIDI controller value is equal to 1. So let me just, all right, so we'll say our subtype, I'm sorry, so we'll say type is controller, MIDI controller is equal to, and we're going to say 11 here. Okay, so what we want to do is we're going to now transform CC11. So anytime that this ends in CC11, what we're going to do is we're going to say our main value, or let's say our type, and we're going to, let's choose our, I believe our subtype, and we're going to add 10. So what this will do is it'll take CC11 and we're going to add 10 values to it. So now when I move the fader, it's CC21. So now I turn this off, it's CC11. I enable this, it now switches that from CC11 to CC21. So you could do this for each of the controllers, but ideally if you could, within the device that's actually transmitting it, set that to transmit the MIDI controllers that you want. That makes it so much easier. So it's really, Cubase is accepting whatever MIDI CC messages are coming in, and instead of having to transform that all the time, try to fix it at the source if you can. And so, and we just see it says MIDI monitor window shows me my faders are controlling a certain value, and I could change them with the project input transformer option. But in the project input window, I can't choose 3 presets for modulations, CC1. So if I wanted to do this for another CC, so let's say this is controller 1, I want to turn this into controller 2. So anytime I do this, or let's say I want to take controller 1 and make this CC7. So what I want to do now is again come here. We'll say let's choose CC1, and on this, let me just, sorry. So now we edit this, and we're going to do the same thing. So we'll say type is equal to controller, subtype is equal to CC1, and what I want to do is we'll take the, and we're going to add 6. So now when I move my second fader, this is CC1. I turn this on, it's CC7. So I move this, it's CC21. So you could set this up for the 3 CCs, and just you could have 4 different modules that are open. So now I move this, turn this off, it's CC11. It's now CC21. I move this fader because this is active. It's CC7, I turn it off, it's now CC1. But again, try to fix it at the source. So, but now you could, again, have 4 modules. So you don't have to have, 3 separate input transformers. One input transformer can transform up to 4 different messages. Let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, great to see Randy Lee from Texas. Glad you can make it. All right, so we see, hello, I often crash Cubase 13 when I close it, even when there's no project open. Any ideas? So a lot of times when the program crashes when closing it, it means that there's a plugin that hasn't completely terminated. So it's often a third-party plugin that's not releasing from memory, that hasn't shut down, and then was kind of hanging on to particular memory of the system, and that's what causes the problem. So see if you open and just do everything with like built-in plugins and close it if you have the problems, or if it's like a particular generally most 99% of the time it's going to be a third-party plugin that causes that. All right, so we have Vidura Das asks, "Hi Greg, can you please explain easiest way to record in loop and manage multiple records in one audio track? I have Cubase 13 Pro, and thanks for beautiful work. Greetings from Croatia." All right, so let's say I'll just create a quick audio file here. I'll just drag a loop in so we don't have to have silence here. So. Okay, so I'm going to just take this particular loop here, and I'll just send it to bus quickly, and let's add an audio track, and its input is from the group. All right, so I want to just do a kind of a cycle recording. We're going to do multiple passes on top, so just come right over here. I'll pick something a little more interesting, sorry. Okay. Okay, so let's say we'll let me just get this level set a little better. Sorry about that. All right. Okay, take 3. All right. All right, so let's say we have pass 1, pass 2, pass 3, and we see these labeled as take 1, take 2, take 3. You don't have to do this in a cycle. Okay, so let's say we stopped recording. Now we have multiple, when we see these diagonal lines, on the events here, we see these diagonal lines that indicates that there's multiple files underneath. And if we wanted to see all the files that are underneath, we could just click on lanes, and our lanes will show us all of the different takes that we've done on this particular track. So what we see highlighted here is what we're hearing. If we select the hand tool, which is also known as the comp tool, we can select different lanes to audition. So if we say, okay, I want this, I want to listen to this, and we could now just drag and select different events. And we say, okay, I want to hold down my control or command key. You could audition. Let me just fix preference here. So now if we wanted to audition different takes, we could do that. But as we do this, at this point, we could select our different snippets and then say, I want this, this, and this makes our perfect take. Now we could close the lanes, and all of our multi-track information would be our comp, where we could have the best parts of multiple recordings. We could assemble them and create a composite track and comp those together so that we could have exactly the best parts. So once you have that, open up the lanes, and then you can see all the takes, and what you see kind of highlighted is what you hear. And again, hold down the control key. You could audition different takes just that easily. So let me know if that's helpful for you. And thanks for being on from Croatia. All right. All right, so we see Randy Lee says, hi, Greg, from Texas. Finally got my Cubase up and running. It's great. How do you move the master bus to the right? Thanks. Okay, so if we have kind of like your mix console here, and you always want the master bus in the mixer, let me just add a bunch of audio tracks. Okay, and I want my master bus to always be fixed on the right-hand side here. So what we could do is we go to the visibility tab, and then we'll see zones. So again, inspector at the top, select visibility, and then click zones. We'll see our input output buses listed here. We have our stereo out. When we see 3 dots. So if I click the dot to the right, as I scroll over, we can just have those particular channels scroll, but this one will be anchored to the right. If I want, let's say, audio 16 to be anchored to the left, like maybe a lead vocal that I always want to keep my eye on, I could click in the left dot here, and as we do that, that'll be anchored to the left. My master fader or groups or effects could be anchored to the right, and we could have multiple channels in the center that we could scroll between. So again, go to in the inspector to the visibility tab at top, and we want to come over to the zones, and then you could anchor the zones right there. All right, so we have Vincent just saying greetings to everyone. Thanks for being on. All right, so we see Darren Flake says, thanks for my issues to playback. When printing the vocals, they become offbeat. I'm not sure why. I thought it'd be because I'm processing a channel with plugins all the way to the parallel. So yeah, it doesn't matter where the plugins are. If it's out of time, it's not a plugin issue. But yeah, it's because that's automatically compensated for. All right, so Vincent asked, do you have any new information regarding removing unused group effects tracks with the key command? Any success? So I didn't find anything. I think we worked on this maybe last week or on Tuesday, so we could find channels. I don't know of a way to automatically, select, we could select based on a lot of criterias, but one of them I haven't found is to select based on no source. So we could find pretty easily, like if we have a number of tracks, if I have a group track here, and let's say I have these tracks going to a group channel, that when we look at our group channels, so if we just wanted to come over here, so let's say, if we want to look for only group channels or effects channels, as we open them, we can see that this has 4 sources. If we go up, we can see that group 1, that, so we could navigate this way, but let's say if we go to this group channel, we can see no sources. So I don't know of a way to automatically disable that. But in essence, if there is no sources feeding the group track, if you're concerned about CPU usage, if nothing is feeding it, it's not processing audio. If it's VST3 plugins, which is going to be the vast majority, there is a preference, so that when you go to your Cubase preferences, to plugins, to suspend VST3 plugin, so it's not taking any processing power, but I don't know a way to automatically select to see if there's no source feeding this group channel to erase it. So, but you can determine which, pretty easily which group or effects channels don't have any sources and delete those. But I haven't found an automated way to do that. And some people would say, don't add groups or effects that you're not using. But if you're using, I realize that you may be starting from a template. All right. All right. So we have Martin checking in. Thanks for joining us. I believe he's from Germany, if I remember correctly. All right, Benny asks, question, can you show how to do automation for the wah-wah pedal in an audio track? So I assume, let's come over here. Let's say I want to put a wah-wah pedal on this. So I think we could do it 2 ways. So let's just say, so there's a wah-wah effect here that we could do. So let's say if I wanted to automate this, that if we automate here, and we could kind of pick the frequencies here. And that's automated, but let's say if you want to do like the pedal form, we'll come over to under distortion to the VST amp rack. And let's come over here to the wah-wah. So we'll turn it on, and as we do this, so now we'll read back the automation here. Let's see if that is working as expected. So we'll see the wah-wah automation. So if we wanted to just automate the particular parameter as well. So, and then if you wanted this for like a quick control slot, we can come over here. I think we could just click on learn, move the parameter, and then it's just simply a quick control for that plugin. So if I have a MIDI remote, I will come over here. Let's put switches to my focus quick controls. And now my first fader, when I open up the plugin, that will automatically control just using my remote here. So I have my MIDI remote. You see, as I move this, I'll open up the plugin window. So this is sending out focus quick control, and then that's controlling the wah-wah, just like that. All right, so we see from Mohammed Salah, hello, Mr. Greg. Does the profile include all quantized files and keyboard shortcuts? Yes, so include your quantized presets, your keyboard shortcuts, your macros, your global workspaces, your preferences, your plugin presets. Those are all carried over in the profile. And to export a profile, if you're not familiar with it, if you want to migrate your settings to someone else's computer that's running Cubase, or to another computer, if you're migrating systems, go to your edit menu, go to Profile Manager. You can see that for my previous MacBook Pro, it was i9. I just imported all my settings from there, and they just all my key commands and preferences all automatically transferred over. All right, so we see question, what's the best way to share a Cubase project with another Cubase user? I ran into this issue where I did a project backup, however the Groove Agent samples didn't get shared. So what I would do, because, Groove Agent is a separate plugin, so it could have its own particular file. So let's say if we have a Groove Agent instance here, and just to make it kind of more fail-safe, so let's say we'll have our Groove Agent SE, and if I have, let's say I'll just drag some okay, so once I have, let's say I have these files here, all you'd have to do, the best thing I would do, because think of the file structure for Groove Agent could be independent of the project. But if we right click and we choose to export kit with samples, I would just choose your particular project folder here. So say, okay, I want to go and put it in my, February 6, 2024 project, or if you want to create, and this way you could back up the samples directly into your Groove Agent samples directly into the project folder, so that they could just simply take those if they get prompted. This way it's looking kind of at the same hierarchical level, and those samples could automatically be included and carried over with the backup project. So just store this as, make a separate subcategory for Groove Agent samples from project, and put that into the project folder. And, you could just simply export it there. Some people will also very easily just have all the samples laid out as an audio track, and then all the samples are carried over in the project and will be included in the pool. But again, just come over and within Groove Agent itself, right click and export the kit with patterns, or just, I'm sorry, it's not that. We'll right click and export. Let me just get the right Groove Agent here, sorry. So at this point, export kit with samples and place that into the project folder, and that way the samples will migrate with the project. All right, so we see Mohammed Salah says, and it's different from Cubase 12 to Cubase 13 because I imported from Cubase 12 to 13, make it not working perfect. So yeah, I mean, generally, like those are carried over, but so every time I've done it, those particular files. But it could be also, if you're going from Cubase 12 to Cubase 13 on the same computer, you don't need to do that. The settings are automatically migrated. But if you're going from Cubase 12 one computer to Cubase 13 on another computer, if you could let me know, that would be helpful. All right, so Kevin Mehmet asks, can you use the Project Logical Editor for Steinberg Line 6 for Helix native presets? If you get Helix native, but by next week, that would be helpful. I'll see if I could get a license for it. But usually the Project Logical Editor deals with elements like events, tracks within the project, not necessarily presets. But Kevin, if you could let me know what exactly you want the Project Logical Editor to do with presets, that would be helpful. All right, Vincent asks, question, is there any way to access more than 5 insert velocities? Currently, I think it's set to a fixed value for the input velocity. So when we come here, if you're not familiar with it, as you put notes in, so let's say if I come here to my drum editor and I say, okay, as I paint notes in, it'll put the notes at a velocity of 100, but if I select a different preset here of 70, when I put that in, the velocity will be 70 or 90 or whatever value you want. You could set up the different thresholds. So this is set to 5. You could always, if you need it more, what you could do is just select all the notes. And let's say if we come over to, our velocity here, so let's say, let's look at the info line. So, what we could do if I put in these notes and I wanted them at a different velocity value. So you could set up key commands to do that. You could set up like a fixed velocity command. But if let's say I want all these velocities to be 66, I think if I hold down the control key, hold down command, that now any notes that I selected, I could just type the value in 45, hold down control command, then hit enter, and all the velocities will change accordingly. So I want these to be 120, and you can see those velocities change accordingly here. So if you wanted to put in one of 5 values and then change the value, you could just do it like that as well. Okay, so you see Vincent just wants to remove unused group and effects tracks. I like to make a big universal template for all kinds of projects after importing the stems. I want a command to remove empty audio tracks, folders, and unused groups effects tracks. I'll pass it along. Since there's no real consequences of having it. We can remove unused tracks, but I'll continue to play around. But I think it's pretty easy to select your, unless you have 128 groups, to select your groups and effects and find it, but I'll pass it along regardless. All right, wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer on from Mission Viejo, California. Thanks for joining us. All right, so Yash asks, is there a way to automate the last touched parameter? So what you can do, so let's say if I have an insert here, and let's say I'm in my morphing channel strip, I'm just opening up a different one here. Okay, so let's say we come over here to Razor. Okay, so what you can do is just say, okay, I want this particular parameter, and then you could say show release automation track, and at that point it will automatically open that in. So it's not necessarily the last one, but you can right click and say, show the gain automation track and have that exposed, and that's part of the VST3 spec. There are companies that haven't implemented that feature of the VST3 spec within their plugins, and it's so if your third-party plugin doesn't do that, let them know that you would like to see that because it's part of the actual specification. All right, so Suede TV and Recording Studio asks, I see how to draw in volume changes for a virtual instrument, but how do I draw an expression in other processes? So if it's going to be a MIDI event, you would just come over here in the controller lane, and you could have different controls that will show up. But you can see your expression, and then you could just grab your pencil tool and draw in different, so if you say, okay, I want this to be my modulation, and if you wanted to just kind of click on the plus sign, you could say, okay, I want to see my, modulation and expression, and just kind of drawing it in with the pencil. And if you turn off snap, you can have finer control over that as well. So, but it would just kind of show up. Expression is just a MIDI CC. This way it is automatically moved with the part, contained within the part, and you could edit it against particular notes as well. So if we select a group of notes here, we can move the notes with the expression. So if I wanted to make a copy, we could do that and automatically move the MIDI CC data once this is selected, which it is by default, so that when we select particular notes, all of the CC data underneath moves. So it's a great way. It's why so many composers use Cubase, because they can see all their expression lanes open all the time that they need. Okay, so we see just a question, why the vocals are not centered. It sounds like they're coming from left and right, but not from the center. Please help. So it could, depend on the routing of the particular file. So let's say if I wanted to come back to this project, and I'll revert it. All right, so let's say, if you're using plugins, so let's say I want to make this into like a stereo track, and I have like a reverb here. So, and this is, so it could depend upon like the effects processing that's going on. So try to strip it of, various effects and see if you listen to it dry. So if it's,
so naive.
So if, it should sound like it's pretty much in the
Now your
center
packing
here.
box is ready to leave.
So if I pan it here, like let's say left
Our musical
and
history,
right. So if we're in the
lay out
center,
on the floor.
but when you start to add
I've
plugins
got to choose what's mine and what's yours.
and you add like delays,
'Cause now you're asking Beatles or songs.
and also check to make sure that the routing, like this is going to my stereo out, so we can see here, while this is going to my stereo output,
Something
if I send this
about it just sounds
to,
so wrong.
if it's routed to the left or to the right
But
channels.
it's too late to start a fight. Take the records that you
So if you're doing a parallel processing and let's say you're sending it to two groups, one group is panned left, one group is panned right, that can make it sound more, that can make it sound like it's not in the center. So, but, try isolating it and just sending it straight to the stereo output. And, that should sound like it's in the center, but it's probably going to be a routing or an effects processing issue that makes it sound like it's going to the left and right channel. So. Okay. So we see question, the modifier key to control parameters with more precision differ sometimes from plugin to plugin. Is there a way to have the same modifier key for every plugin? For example, Steinberg plugins use shift while Waves uses command or control. So unfortunately, it's up to the plugin developer what functions that they have within the plugin itself. So, we can't, I'm not sure that Waves would want us to change their development philosophy, and that maybe it's always been that way and it's always been shift in Cubase. And I know sometimes if you're using both tools, having to memorize that, but probably Steinberg may not want Waves to change theirs to, ours to command, and Waves probably doesn't want Steinberg to change theirs to shift. So it could be kind of a development philosophy in which modifier keys are used for particular functions, and that has a legacy and a muscle memory for users. So, I don't think I'm not sure if it's specified within the VST spec or not. But, I think it's okay for different ones. You could write to Waves and see if they could have an option to comply with the settings within the host parameter or preference. So, and for within Cubase, it's, for more settings than just plugins as well. Okay. Okay, so we see the Pentagon Audio Manufacturers asks, hi Greg, when recording keyboards I usually do stereo signal plus MIDI. When editing, I audio warped the audio in a few spots. Would it be possible to audio warp MIDI in sync with the audio? All right, so let's take a look and see if we could. All right, just jump to this project here. I'll just do a new project, just make it a little easier, clearer. Okay, so let's come over here. I'll put just a click on. Let me add an audio track, and I'll set retro log as its input. All right, I'll just take off my. Okay, so now we recorded the audio and the MIDI simultaneously. All right. So I think if we, let's see what happens if we group these together. So I'm just going to hit Control or Command plus G. So now as I move this, so I don't think if we come here, so let's say if I want to split, and it may not work for warping, but let's say, so you can see that as I move for some functions that if they're grouped, that I'm moving kind of the MIDI and the audio simultaneously. Let's see what happens if we now go to free warp. So here I think warping is going to be just kind of for audio only, but you know, we could obviously, MIDI has kind of very similar flexibility. So if we wanted to, you know, so I think when we do warping, but you know, it's not going to carry over. But if we move, like if we come over here and move the events, but you could always, you know, let's say if they're ungrouped, Control or Command plus U, that as you look at it here, you know, we could align, you know, so say we go to the next hit point, you know, so while it doesn't warp because, you know, the MIDI is so warpable already, but as you move the MIDI, we could see that it's automatically, we could see the playhead cursor, like the start, and automatically align that to notes very easily. So it won't warp with it, but it's super easy, I think, just to kind of take those notes and align them to the audio as well. So in essence, audio warping is trying to give the same flexibility to audio that MIDI has had for years. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely just popped in. He's going to watch it after a meeting, but just came by, hit the like button. Thank you for that. All right, so we see from Kevin Mehmed, can you show me how to use templates in Helix Native, save and import templates and make your own templates? So once again, I don't have Helix Native to really show that, but I'll see if I get a license for next week's live streams. Okay. All right, so we see from Vincent, when opening the MIDI remote in a separate window, is there a way to make it be always on top? All right, so let's come over to the MIDI remote. So I don't think so, but we might be able to open it up also from... Let's see if that automatically just puts it into the lower zone. So if we go to the MIDI Remote Manager, that looks like it could always be on top. So it looks like it defaults to the lower screen, but it doesn't look like there's always on top. I'll pass that along as a feature request. But it looks like it's kind of designed to be anchored in the lower zone for that. See Uno Momento from Finland saying it's minus 20 degrees Celsius and sunny. All right, let's go to some questions that were sent in advance. So we'll pop over, give me just a moment. I'll open up my Word document here. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, I think this is from Sway TV and Recording Studio had asked this wish list. When I open up a sound library and each instrument has a long, sometimes complicated name, is there any way besides typing in each sound manually into the track name to have the instrument name and articulation auto-populate the track name? All right, so to do this, what you need to do is, it depends if we're starting a track, like if we have an instrument track here that's already loaded. So say, okay, I go to retro log, that's going to kind of carry the name over. But if we go to the media bay, and this is one of the things with VST3 presets, and every plugin company could do this. Most of them may not employ the technology that's available. Which could be problematic in some cases. But let's say I want to come over here to a retro log sound. I can now look in the particular retro log sound. So when I come over here, say I like this particular sound when I audition it. So we'll say, okay, we audition this sound. I like that. So now when I drag and drop, we could see that that particular name is automatically added. And so when we drag and drop based from the media bay, that the name of the preset is automatically carried over. So third-party plugins may have different options for handling their presets. What you can do, and this could be a laborious process, I realize, is if you're in the particular plugin, so let's say we open this up here, and you have a preset saved, someone may have gone through and made VST3 presets. And if you've made your own VST3 presets, you could drag and drop those over. A lot of plugin companies thinking that, okay, we're going to use this with multiple programs, and maybe not the other programs that support VST3 plugins may not fully support VST3 name and preset hierarchy. So it's really kind of up to the plugin developers if they want that, because there's no way for us to extrapolate the name from other preset systems. So we have this defined as, we get to define it as part of the VST specification, so that when we do drag over, that those particular names of the presets are automatically carried over. All right, so we see question. I would like to ask if there's any way to widen the scroll bar areas. I would love to be able to navigate the touchscreens more easily, but as a 6'4" guy, my big paws struggle to get my finger precisely connected to the touch bars to scroll. I feel like a lot of options are becoming more available for touch use on Cubase Nuendo without third-party software in the Mac. If we could just know how to tweak a few things, the scroll bar width, it'd be great. So, I know that, when we try to fit a tremendous amount of information, into Cubase, that, some things will, maybe be sized. One of the issues gets to be especially on Mac OS, since the operating system itself doesn't really support touch. They do a lot of wonderful touchscreen stuff, obviously, with iOS for iPads and phones, but I don't think that's really carried over for Mac OS. Whereas Windows has been kind of very touch savvy for a lot of ways already. So if we did a lot of development for touchscreen, it could be all kind of wasted effort if Mac OS came out with some new enhancements to the operating system. So there's no way that I know of to kind of widen this, but you could always just, if you're just scrolling here, even if you could mimic, I think it's probably faster to hold down the shift key and use your mouse scroll wheel to navigate within the project like so, rather than kind of reaching to the screen and moving this white bar. So I think once you kind of learn some of these particular shortcuts for navigating within the project window, so we could go up and down using the mouse scroll wheel. Holding down the shift key, we can navigate. So no modifier keys, we can navigate vertically. Shift, we can navigate horizontally. If we hold down the command or control key, this will allow us to zoom horizontally. And if we hold down command or control plus shift, we could zoom vertically as well. So I think once you kind of learn these, that the mouse is a really great way to be able to kind of navigate. And if you hold down kind of the scroll wheel itself, most mice will allow you to push down on the scroll wheel. You could kind of move the contents of the project around like that. So I think that's a really good, fast way, because I think people, the mouse is probably more accessible than the touchscreen, but I'll pass it along regardless. Okay. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. In the Chord Pad remote control, we could set up a controller to modify voicing and or tension. Is it possible to have velocity control the voicings? Example, when I hit harder, the voicing goes up. So currently it's not an option to set the velocity for that. So if you're not familiar with this, we'll go to the chord pads. I'll activate the chord pads. So when I go to play, so if we want to go to the setup, and we could see that we could modify the voicing modifiers here. If we use like an F sharp 2 or F sharp, F sharp 1 or F sharp 2. So if I come here, I could hit F2 to go down chord voicings, or F sharp to go up and change the voices. But we don't necessarily navigate based on velocity, or we could have different MIDI CCs. So if I want to play and trigger the chord, and here I have CC1, my modulation wheel. And I think why velocities aren't an option is because a lot of people will play and will trigger different velocities for the musical context of the chords. A lot of people use chords. Like, I'm not a keyboard or piano player. I have really poor keyboard and piano skills, but a lot of people will use this and will use the velocities to get kind of the musical context. And they want that as a kind of a musical choice for dynamics, which is pretty natural, and not to necessarily change the chords. So again, we could use different MIDI notes. We could also just, like, as we come over here to different chords, if you hold down, different options, like while you scroll. But but the velocities are going to be kind of reserved for for kind of the musicality, so that you could mimic a performance more easily. So that's why the velocities are kind of designed, I think, to work more for the musical context, as opposed to, when I play louder, I get a different chord voicing. So, but you can do it with different MIDI CCs or different trigger notes for different chord voices. And just kind of a follow-up, and it says, I'm thinking of something like an input transformer that could transform velocity into a controller, but I can't figure out how to program it. So let's say if I wanted to, we'll try to set this up. If we wanted our velocity to control controller 1, so let's see if we could get that going for the chord pads. Okay, so we'll come over here to our input transformer. We'll put this on track. And I think that there's a preset that we may be able to kind of backward engineer. Okay, so let's see if we could. We want to take our velocity, and we'll set this to type, to controller, and subtype, or we'll set this as equal to controller. And we'll make this controller 1. Here we'll set to is set to fixed value, controller 1. Okay, so let's say we'll do velocity inside range 0 to 127. And let's see if we need to set note first here. So it doesn't seem like it's. Let me just check the settings here one more time. Yeah, so I will see if I can play with it some more, but I think it's going to be kind of best used for triggering, with your CCs. But I'll see if I could play around with that some more. I thought maybe, let me just see if I had any user presets to kind of. Okay. let me see if we have this track. Let me also just check. We have the inputs here coming from the chord track, chord pads. Yeah, so I'll see if I can play around with it some more, but and see if I can get that to translate. All right, next question. How do I have two main mixes in Cubase? I want to have two output buses, so I can have stereo mix and a 7.14 mix. Okay, so really all you need to do is when you go to your audio connections, we could say we're going to go to your outputs. We'll set a stereo mix here, and let's add a bus and make it a 714 bus. So when we go to our mix console, we could now see that we'll have our stereo bus and our 7.14 bus. If you're doing that, you may also want to utilize the control room. So let's go to the audio connections. Let's go to our control room. I will add a monitor. So, and we'll make this monitor configuration 714. So now when I switch to monitor 2, this is now our 7.14. So if I have this particular track, instead of going out to the stereo output, I'll route this to my 714 out. So we can now have, now the audio can go directly to the 714 out. Let me just set the so we could see that this channel is now going out of the 714 out. So you could send it to your 714, and once you have this kind of set up, you could also choose your down mix presets from. Let me set the main output here and audio connections to set this as my main out. So now we could say my 714, if you wanted to kind of do down mixes of it, you could say your 714 is down mixing to stereo to mono to 5.1. So once you have that as your main output, you can now just come here and you could do your down mixes if you wanted to, or just switch speakers to your stereo speakers like that. All right. Remove that bus. All right, so we had a question. First question about the interface I'm using Cubase 12. I'm using two monitors. Here's the thing. When I want to learn something and I do not want to learn a lot, for example, Hallian 7 tutorials is opened with the YouTube tutorial on the right, the Cubase with the open project, and Hallian 7 opened as VST in front. When clicking the pause button in YouTube, the Hallian 7 disappears and you must click again to put it inside again. Is there a way to keep this VST window always open / showed? So I'm not sure if it's on, so if I opened up, let's say we'll just give it a quick try here. So let's say I have my Hallian Sonic open here and I'm doing a tutorial. Let's say I'm watching this and it's over here. Let's open up. All right, so let's say I want to open this up over here. So it looks like once we're here, so it could be depending on, what is the active window, and when you have kind of windows that are contingent upon the active application. So if I just say, let's go to, my browser. Now let's go to Cubase. So as I Alt-Tab, we can see that the window and the plugin is staying open, but it may work a little differently on Windows. So if you could, maybe write back and let us know if you're doing it in Windows or Mac. But it could depend, and also how multi-windows are handled in Cubase 13 versus Cubase 12. It could also be a factor with that, because with Cubase 13 is kind of multi-windows compliant. All right, so we have a second question. I have a two bar chord progression with a chord track. First chord is 4 beats, second is 3 beats, third 1 beat. When dragging these chords into the VST, the last chord in a row always appears as a 4 beat. Data into the instrument track is shown below. It doesn't matter if you are in 3/4 or more exotic 5/4 measures. The chord always is 4 beats. Did I miss something to avoid this? All right, so let's say I drag these chords to this event, and we can see that they're all like 4 beats long when we look at that. All right, so if I want to have this be 3 beats, this to be 2 beats, this to be 4 beats, I would change my grid here to beat, and I would just put in an X chord. So let's say I want this to be 2 beats, and I want this to be 3 beats. So now when I come over here, I drag this down, we could see that these chords are where we have X, there's no data under the X. And even if we come here, let's select the track and we go to our project menu to chord track, and we'll say create chord events, or not create chord events, but chords to MIDI. Sorry about that. So chord track to chords to MIDI. That those pauses, the X where you don't want any data, just put an X chord. Otherwise, it's thinking that that chord is lasting until the next chord begins. So try just putting an undefined chord, and I think that will help you with that. All right, so we have a question. It says, hi Greg, I'm using a template for Cubase 13 Pro. The problem I'm having is that the mixer expand sections exclusivity is on. I don't want that, but I can't find a way to turn it off. When I right click in the mixer while hovering over inserts, I can see the option, but it's already unticked, so it should already be off. Is there another way to turn this feature on and off? All right, so let's take a look. I'll build a new template. So let's add 8 audio tracks. Okay, we go to our mixer. Okay, so I'm going to just, I think if we come over here, let's get to the section settings. So we'll say fixed number of slots. Okay, oh, I don't think it's that. Sorry, let me just. Okay, so now when you come here, the other sections are going to close. Okay, so I'm going to save this as my template. All right, and we'll call this February 9th. Okay, so I'm going to close this project. Let's start our project with our new template. Activate our template. See our 8 tracks will go into our mix console. And we can see that that is preserved. So, make sure that you actually have that set in the template before saving the template. So you see that that is preserved in the template. So if you open up the template and start it and go, and every time you start from the same template, if it wasn't set initially, then that's not going to be preserved in your template. So if you take the template and change it here and save the song, it's saved within the song, but maybe not within the actual template itself. All right, so question, can you show a good way to do gain staging and tell us your opinions about it? So, always, my thoughts on gain staging are, one, just to make sure you're not, artificially adding too much gain in any step of the process. So if you find that your recorded, your signal's not hot enough and you're trying to compensate by adding gain in software or through a preamp because the initial input wasn't good initially, then you're always kind of, creating problems for yourself in the long run. I'll just show, let's take a look at like a project I played bass on for Hot Mess. So with Gareth and Michael Teams and Pablo, let me just, I think it's under my Gareth folder. All right, so let's just take a look at this. So I see a lot of people, going crazy trying to get every level super hot. This is like a pretty good example of gain structure. So like this on the backing track, we have a lot, a healthy dynamic range to work with. And even with the bass, I could get this bass to be kind of much hotter. But this way, whenever I kind of give this to someone, it's easy for them to mix. So leave, between, a lot of people aim for minus 12 to minus 18 dBs for tracking. So as you kind of and I think a lot of people when they're setting up their mix also, I try to leave my master fader here. A lot of people I see with gain structure problems are using their master fader as their monitor controller. And this is kind of the beauty of the control room is, a lot of people may run into a situation where they're using this as their, like they may have their speakers, their powered studio monitors kind of cranked up, and they turn this down, and then when you go to export, you significantly diminish the levels of the export because the export's based upon the gain structure of the master fader. Whereas you have the control room, I could adjust just the monitoring volume. And we notice that as I adjust the monitoring volume, that the gain structure of the mix isn't affected. So use the control room so that you can set the monitoring level without affecting the gain structure of the mix. And, realize that, it's always, so get like a healthy amount of gain in so that you don't have to, super adjust the gain or, do stuff that kind of detriments the dynamic quality of the recording afterwards. And then you could just simply, at that point, you have a lot more leeway. But try not to use the master fader as your monitor control. Use the control room for that, and that can solve a lot of problems. All right, question. What are your opinions about the sample rate and bit rate to use while editing, mixing, and mastering? I think that if your track doesn't sound good, it's probably not the sample rate or sample rate's fault. I know a lot of people gravitate to 48K. Some people do everything at 96K. We had a question. Someone on a live stream wanted me to ask like Zed and his team what sample rate they use. They're still 44.1. there's a significant audio difference going from a 16-bit to a 24-bit recording. So always do 24-bit. If you have an audio interface like the Steinberg AXR or URC series that has 32-bit, that will sound better. It could be a little subtle, but the 32-bit integer recordings will capture more information and will improve the sound. A lot of times I do 24-bit 44.1 for a lot of my personal projects. I'm not setting them off to be, considered for the Grammys or anything like that. But, I think, 44.1, 48K, if ultimately you're going to deliver to CD, which a lot of people don't do, admittedly, in 2024, 44.1 is good if you're going to tie it to video. 48K if you have a lot of computing resources, working at 96K, sometimes 96K may not make a difference. If you're doing a classical thing that's very, very subtle, you may benefit from 96K. If you're doing kind of a thrash metal or punk rock recording, you may not benefit from 96K. So. All right, so we just see a question. I just changed the sample rate on the project from 48 to 44.1 in Cubase 13. When doing that, you're getting some questions. I've seen you do this on YouTube, so I followed your process. But I got one question that you didn't get. Do you want to convert the sample rate of clips in musical mode? I answered no to that, but was that the right choice? So generally, you could always choose yes for that, because just because in that way, if the events are kind of dynamically changing the speed as they play back, that's what musical mode will allow them to do. You'd want that to carry over as well. So I would say yes to that. All right, let's go back to our live questions. Thanks again for people who want to send questions in advance. You can send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. Let's find my spot. All right, so the Pentagon Audio Manufacturer says, great to know that drag editing works if audio MIDI are grouped. Just learned something new today, and that's going to be very useful. Thanks a lot. Huge hugs from Portugal. Thanks for being on. All right, so we see from Suede TV and Recording Studio about the question about dragging it in. It says, but my follow-up question is, how can I have the articulation name populated, not just the library name? So, it's if it's not, I don't know of a way to automatically have the articulation populated in the name, but many times when people are working, so let's say if I come here, the preset name may have the articulation included, but most tracks, if you're doing orchestral stuff that has articulations, like let's say if I wanted to come here to my violin one track and we double click and we go to our we go to our expression map. So let's say we choose our violin one, which articulation would you expect? Because most instruments will have multiple articulations. Do you want to have, and most people will switch articulations on the particular instrument as well. So you go from pizz to marcato to legato to sforzando to, to tremolos. So you could have, 20, 30, sometimes 40 articulations on a particular instrument. So which one would you want? They're all kind of the same weight because that instrument can play all of those sounds, and that sound designer and that team that did the sampling, gives you all those options. And maybe, how do you choose which one to name if you have 40 articulations? So there isn't a way to automatically do that because most people will be dealing with multiple articulations on a single track as well. Uno Momento asks, what MIDI controller is suggested for Cubase /PC? I mean, less than €300. So there's a lot of different MIDI controllers. If I was looking for one, I personally I use on my desk, I have a Nectar Panorama P4. I've had it 10 years or so, almost 11 years, still works. My pitch bend wheel doesn't, my modulation wheel doesn't move my pitch bend wheel. That's good. A lot of controllers tend to die. One design flaw is that, when you have the modulation and the pitch bend wheel that are kind of on the same board, they often, like the modulation wheel eventually can make the pitch bend wheel go bad, and all of a sudden I get a message from people. It's like, yeah, all of my MIDI is out of tune for some reason, and it's what it is the pitch bend wheel is breaking, and it's transmitting pitch bend information. So check like the pitch bend and MIDI controller. I think having 8 faders, 8 knobs, if you have some drum pads for trigger functions, are really good as well. See how the keyboard feels to you. I'm not like a piano player, but sometimes I touch certain keyboards and I don't like how the key bed feels. I'm not like I have a weighted piano controller that I, have had for years and love. But sometimes, when you touch a controller, you may like it, how it feels. Some popular ones are, Native Instruments is popular. They could be probably maybe a little more expensive outside of your range. I like to have stuff that you could set all the parameter values on the instrument itself as opposed to a software editor, just in case that software editor gets discontinued or doesn't work with an operating system if the company chooses not to do it. So if it's kind of self-contained, where you could make all the adjustments on the unit itself without having to rely on a software editor. The software editor is nice, but if it could work with a software editor and without one, I would still look for one that has MIDI, physical MIDI ports, as well as USB. So some popular ones, Native Instruments is popular. Arturia, I kind of personally like when I mess around with the Arturia controllers. I thought they were like really well built and very solid. Akai is a very popular choice. There's old staples such as the M Audios, and a lot of other companies have kind of lower priced models as well. And if it has a MIDI remote script, look for that, because that could make the whole setup with Cubase much easier as well. And start thinking future proof. Like, I like to, will I be using this controller? Like, I've had my Nectar for over 10 plus years. Will this controller work in 10 plus years? Which could mean now, will this controller be, thought of for MIDI 2.0? So it's still kind of at its infancy now, but if the controller itself has some, polyphonic aftertouch, has some forward thinking concepts for MIDI 2.0, Cubase already supports it. There's not a lot of VST instruments that do it yet. There's, very few hardware instruments that do. But if you wanted to maximize your investment, think of a controller that's already thinking MIDI 2.0 as well. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters on. Wishing everyone, she hit the like buttons, wishing everyone a safe weekend. It's always better when Sable's on. All right. All right, so Randy Lee asks, Greg, can I print a track to another track trying to isolate a kick and snare from an old stereo drum using an EQ plugin so I could run it through Slate? Thanks. All right, so there's a couple ways to do this. So let's say if we have, let me just find something with drum loop on it here. Just okay. So if you, so I'm not sure if it's like a stereo like, kick and snare. If, probably if that's the case, it may not be panned, I would assume. So let's say we have something along the lines of this. If you have Spectral Layers Pro, one of the cool things is we can come over here. Let's go to Spectral Layers. And I think this is in the Pro version where we could kind of unmix drums. So let's say we listen to this. All right, so we go to unmix and we'll say drums. And at this point, we'll say, okay. So as we listen to this now, and let's listen to just a snare. And listen to cymbals. And again, all together. So now I could take that particular drum loop and say, okay, I want the snare to be isolated. So I could come right over here and drop the snare in. So now I could have the kick and cymbals. So at that point, you could isolate the particular tracks like that. So if it's, if it is like where you have kick on the left channel and, the snare on the right, that type of stereo recording, which you're probably not lucky enough to do, then you could go to project and go to convert tracks and say multi-channel to mono. And then you could just kind of split that. So maybe bounce it first before doing spectral layers. But you could do it just like that. So, but check out like Spectral Layers Pro, and you could get a trial version and try it out on your particular projects as well. All right. Okay, so let's see, reading through comments. All right, so we see from Bruno B. Hi, Greg. How to display markers directly in the piano rolls in the bottom part? Thanks, Bruno. Okay, so let's say we have, just go to a different project here. And okay, so let me just, all right, so let me just change, let's get to the preferences and let's get to the event display markers. So let's say we want to show from the active marker track, see if that's carried over. I'm just going to change the color of this. Okay, so we see in the bottom part, let's see if we can show the markers here. So we can see it, we see this yellow line indicated here. Let me just see if, don't think it carries over there, but let's see if we, I think if we come to our global tracks, in our key editor here, so let's get to our, and so we should see, so once we have the arrangement in, so we could see the markers here in, directly in the extended screen. Once we activate kind of the arrangement there, so we can see the markers, but let's see if we can see it in the lower zone, if we get them to show up. I think a lot of times, since these are perfectly synchronized, but it doesn't look like, let me just drop some markers in here. So I don't see, let me just check my status line as well. So it doesn't look like the markers are kind of carried over. We can see it directly above, but not in the editor. And when you're, so I think since you can see those visually, that's kind of the intention. But if you're in the standalone, we can now see the marker track here where you couldn't see it visually. So I don't know of a way to show it in the lower zone MIDI editor, but you still have this as kind of a visual reference, and you could activate the marker visibility by going into preferences and go to event display markers, and to show that, and I'll just see if there's any preferences here. To event display to see if there's a way, but it doesn't look like that it shows up in the editor, but we see it kind of directly above. And if you select the markers, they'll move the play position, which is in sync with it. So sorry about that. All right, so you see Vincent just says, thank you for the answers on today's questions. Greg, be blessed. Thank you. You're welcome. Glad to help. All right, so we see Suede TV Recording Studios is how to change fonts and bold commands for the track names in the mix consoles. Yours seems more bold, so it could be a lot of times that I'm actually just utilizing colors. So, and when you select different tracks, and there's some changes from 13.01 to 13.02 for, if you go to preferences here for, let's go to track and mix console channel color. So like the selected channel brightness. So if I have this channel selected, we could, and there is other changes so that if it's selected and it's white, that the text will be black. And if it's kind of at a certain shade of darkness, that the text will contrast with white text. But, so some of the changes, if you go to the preferences, you could have like the track selection brightness, so that as you select, it's more clear and delineated. And if you're coming from 12 to 13, realize that, this contrast has also been increased so that it's easier to read. And many people, when you kind of first started, may have felt, oh, it's so bright, turn this down. But, now, like, I don't want to go back to version 12 because I could clearly see kind of all the options and meters very clearly in version 13. So, but also, try using colors. A lot of people will start off and not use track colors, and everything could look a bit bland from that. And when you see like the colors here, that's also a preference. If you go to, again, under preferences, user interface, you could choose to, not make the tracks or the mix console channel colors. Like it could look like that, but if you want to use the mix console channel colors, hit apply, and then those colors are kind of throughout the channels as well. So the track colors. So utilize colors, they're free. So, and can make the whole experience kind of more engaging. All right, so Mohammed Salah asks, question, can I colorize multi-track and same time in project logical editor with different color, not same. So yeah, we'll show you how to do that. So we'll do just new project. I'll just add a number of tracks, right? And I'll make all these tracks the same boring color. Okay, so these are all the same. So I want to select all the tracks here. Let's go to your project menu to project logical editor. So we want to take our container type is set to track, and we want to say maybe like property is, let's say these are property is set to is selected, and we'll go to set color and we'll say to increment. So now when I come over here, if I did it correctly, we could just increment colors. And I think that we could also, let me just, okay, so I think if we come here, so let's say we want to navigate down, so I'll just put a post process. So now that I have this selected, I may have done that. Will just kind of keep it all the same, but let me see if I did. I may have done a preset for this already. But I think what you could do is kind of, so this will all make them all kind of the same colors. But there, I think I came up with a way to change these all to the same color, and then to deselect. I could work on this for Tuesday just so I could have it kind of dialed in, but like when you go to add tracks, you know, one of the things you could do is like as you add the tracks with this preference, and you can probably look on Cubase index. I think we did it before. I may have created a macro to do it. But like, so let's say you just choose this to use previous track color +1. So now when I go to add multiple audio tracks, they're automatically colorized and increment like that. But I'll play around. If you want to send me an email just as a brain cramp reminder for me for Tuesday's live stream, I'd be happy to do that. All right, wonderful to see Soren checking in from Sweden. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you're well. All right, Jay from Secret Studios asks, hi Greg, regarding previous statement regarding multi-window compliance, is there a way to lock certain windows to certain monitors so they don't shift even when the monitor is off? So I think if the monitor is off, that the windows won't show up. If, you know, those windows, you know, tend to need somewhere to be seen, and they may show up on the single monitor so that you could see what is going on. So with the multi-window support, that's going to be like a Windows OS solution. So not really Mac based, but I think, you know, if you have, and imagine a scenario if you had, you know, like a program open and settings on another screen and that screen disappeared, would you ever be able to see that data that's on a screen that isn't physically connected again. So it may try to move those so that you could move that particular window over. I think that's the thinking of the operating system. Like, how tragic it would be. Like, I can never open or close this program. I can't see this window because we don't have a physical monitor connected to it. So I think that's why it shifts, and I think that is at the operating system level, which is just kind of a fail safe so that you could drag the window over so that it is visible. So I think it's an operating system concern with that. All right, so you just see from Aurora Borealis, use the pen tool to microscopically fix a click or pop. So I'm not sure if it's a question, but if you want to know how to do that, so a lot of times we get this question that like we're in a sample editor and we grab the draw tool and we get this message, please zoom to a resolution lower than 1. So when we want to draw in, if we had like a clicker pop, we need to really kind of zoom in to a high level. And now that we've done that, we can see our pencil tool. We could just draw in our changes to our left and right channels like so. And I think if I hold down Shift, or let's try Command, or maybe Alt. So at this point, we could just draw out, but you may have to zoom at a certain point. Like I can't draw in here where you see kind of the waveform go from solid color to this point. That's when you could draw in or draw out pops or clicks in the audio waveform if needed. All right, you see Michael Teens, happy to hear Dark Glass, one of my favorites, from the Hot Mess catalog. Yeah, Hot Mess, the unofficial Cubase Hangout band. Yes, Hot Mess will be the only band that has a reunion where they get to meet each other all for the first time. So, okay, sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, so JB asks, when using the lower zone, I sized a window to my liking. On the regions tab, when using the range selection tool, once I click the add region, it resizes my lower zone window. I have to resize it back. It's a bug. All right, so let's say I'm here. I'll open up. So let's say I open up my regions. So let's say I want to open regions here. So I'll go to the settings. And I'm just going to set this directly below this track here. So we'll see if we go to our regions that it's still right below that track. So let me just add regions here. So it seems to stay the same for me. The height, so it says when using the lower zone, I use a window to size a window. So I sized it right below that particular track so you can see the full track. When using the range selection tool, once I click the add region, it resizes my lower zone window. I have to resize it back. So let's say if I move it up, so we see just the height goes to group tracks. Come here. It doesn't seem to change the height for me on this as we add different regions. So let me know if I'm doing something differently than you, JB. All right, so we see John A. Walker sending greetings from JWYOU. JWU. So, all right. All right. All right. Maspino asks, hi, Greg. I received a WAV file with recordings of the 70s, but the left bit depth, IL24, the right is 22 bits. How to make it equal 24 bits on both channels? So it could depend on how it was captured. So let's look at like a bit meter. So, all right, so let's say we'll take this project here. All right, let me just see if I... All right, so I'll just come here to the... let's get to the inserts here. Now let's open up supervision, because I think there's a bit meter in supervision. All right. So let's say if I come to my mixer here, and I may have to put this on my... Let me just see if I put it on... I'll just take this off. I'll put on the master output. Same plugin. Okay. I may have to see if I could get this across here. All right, so everything we're doing here is in 32-bit floating point. Let me see if I can show it in Wavelab. Get this point across. So one, it could be how the audio is captured. If it was like the left and right channels weren't fully kind of optimized. So let's say if we're here, all right, so we can see that this right now is like,
there's a cool breeze blowing, chimney smoke in the air. The leaves are starting to change your body.
all right, so like when I first started this, we just, I'll just close this and just kind of show my point here real quick. Oh, let me exit out, just, or let's see if we can set this. All right. All right, so right now you see that everything is at, everything we're doing is at 16-bit because this is like the CD file, the extraction of the CD. Now as soon as I come over here and I make any adjustments, so I changed this by 2/100ths of a dB, and now that it's doing that, it's showing it as in 32-bit floating point. So it could be how the audio is captured it could be that the right channel that is showing 22 bits versus 24 bits, it may just not have captured the full 24 bits of information. So depending on how it was actually captured as well, so it could be the converters. I wouldn't necessarily worry about it, because anytime that you load that WAV file into Cubase and you see that as we do any changes here, so right now we're not adjusting the gain whatsoever. So we're at 0 dB, we play back a 16-bit file. It is then, we should use 16-bit, but I adjust it, 2/100th of a dB. It's now going through the 32-bit floating point, or within Cubase, or in the window, you could do a 64-bit floating point engine. So don't worry about if you have 2 bits that are missing. It could, if you notice that the levels are, unsimilar between the left and right channels, and you could do that in Cubase just by, let's take a file in Cubase, like a stereo file. So select this, let's go to audio. I think we can maybe see it in the statistics. So in here you could see kind of like, what the average levels were for the left and right channels. And if those are slightly different, that could explain the 22 bits versus the 24 bits, maybe how it was captured or ingested or recorded. So that could explain that it's not utilizing all the bits. But once you do any processing inside of Cubase, it's then going to be in 32-bit floating point resolution. So I wouldn't think it's going to be a problem for you. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on from Spain. Glad you could make it today. All right, so we have Ayuel checking in from Switzerland. Thanks for being on, joining us tonight where you are. Okay. See Sable's having problems with the portable hard drive. Sorry to hear that. It's always a bummer. All right, so we see, hi Greg, how can I select multiple pre-post fader green lines in the mixing console at the same time and move them up? So it's there. I haven't found a way to do that for multiple faders. So let's come over here and get to our fixed slots. So, if you want to quickly see, all of your, this is kind of on a channel by channel basis, because most people are, I would say it's pretty rare that you would use all the same inserts on every single channel. But if you quickly wanted to see all of the slots so that you could put them in pre or post fader as you want, we could just come over here, and so we could turn off this. But as you add effects, we could say set as last pre-fader slot here, and then we could just put a post fader. And if we put this as a pre-fader insert, we could see that and see the different colors. We could do this on the inspector as well. So let's say we open up our left zone inspector. We just activate this project here quickly. But since I think it would be rare that you would move all of them, like 16 channels, I would say that you're probably not going to have the same processing. But if you just right click on the inserts, you can say, okay, I want to set that as the last pre, and then, as we add an effect here, you could just kind of right click and then your inspector, so as you do this, you could drag that down to a post slot, and then you could see your pre and post slots right there. But there isn't a way through like quick controls to automatically move the in the lines here. But it seems like a lot of people are wanting this just so that they could quickly put pre or post fader. But I don't, I'll try again. Let's say if I select these 3 tracks, and even if we put it on, since it's not necessarily a parameter, if we put on quick link and move this, it's only going to move one at a time, I think is how it's kind of set up. So even if these channels are quick linked, that is just going to be for a single channel. So, but let me know if you need to, but a lot of people don't necessarily know that you could see all 16 here, or that on the inserts here that you could just say, set as last pre fader, and then as you go to add in, you could kind of set how you want, where you want the post fader insert slots to appear. All right, reading through comments. Yeah, sorry to read disables hard drives. It's a problem. See people giving lots of great advice. But I think Sable mentioned she had a Western Digital, and I remember Michael Wagner had problems with a lot of his Western Digital drives, I believe. You remember him telling me once. All right, see lots of discussion on hard drives. All right, so we see Amanda Hunt Taylor, award-winning songwriter, says, "Can someone tell me where the plugin is located to auto-tune vocals? I've used Cubase for 13 years, but haven't used it for the past 7. I just got Cubase 13 and having to find my way around." All right, so let's say as you want to do tuning a vocal, there's kind of 2 approaches. Probably the most common approach for vocals is just double click to go into the sample editor, and you'll see something called Vary Audio. So we could click on Edit Vary Audio, and that will do an analysis, and now we're able to just come over and do your tuning directly here in Vary Audio. You have choices where you could see, okay, I want to show default controls. I always choose personally to show all smart controls. This will allow us to kind of take our phrases here. We could zoom in, and if we go to the bottom, we could adjust the pitch. If we go from the top, we could adjust kind of the vibrato or the pitch changes, and we'll see kind of these graphic lines. We could tilt the pitch of particular words. We could adjust the formants. We could adjust the volume of particular words. We could also work on transitions. So we could say, I just want, as I adjust this, I want the natural transitions between notes not to be straightened. So we could come here and straighten the pitch and not affect the transitions between notes. So that's more of kind of a graphic editing approach to it. That's very common. And if you wanted to utilize a plugin, that's kind of like a quick turn it on, set what key the song is in, go to the pitch shift category and go to pitch correct. And here we could choose where you want it to be, chromatic, or we're in D major, and this we could kind of set as kind of a turn it on and have it kind of correct the pitch. So if you want to be just like a quick throw something on type of process, you could use pitch correct. If you wanted to do more extensive editing, more graphic editing for the tuning, you could use Very Audio for that. So, and good to have you back in Cubase. We hope to see you on future live streams. Okay, reading through comments. All right. All right, and we see Amanda just says, by the way, loving the new look in ease in which you go from different sections, if I'm saying that right. So, yeah. So it's always an interesting challenge of giving more options, but not having it clutter your workflow or kind of get in your way. All right, so we see Gareth says, wonderful to hear Greg on. So, yeah, it's always good to be on live streams and playing bass on Hot Mess recordings. So, all right, so Sway TV and Recording Studio. Will my Complete Control Mark II 61 key show up in the MIDI remote? If so, how? So I don't think that Native Instruments has done the drivers for it yet, but it's obviously a popular controller. So if you do a search, there is kind of a holding. There's a website if you go to the Steinberg forums, but if you just look for the Complete Control 61 MIDI remote, I think that there might have been some changes with Mark III, but let me know. Yeah, but there should be. These are created by users and often just freely shared. So I'm sure you could find one. And probably Jazz Dude will send a link to the particular kind of repository of different MIDI remote scripts, but I'm sure that there is one for that controller. Yeah, and just as Sable says, go to the Steinberg forum, just do a quick search. All right, you see Jazz Dude's posted the link. He's so good. Appreciate everything you do, Jazz Dude. All right. Okay, so we see Amanda says we are using Cubase AI that came with our Yamaha mixer. I'm not sure if we have that plugin. If not, how can I get it? So it's so if you have the Cubase AI, you could always upgrade, and the Very Audio comes in Cubase Artist or Cubase Pro. So you could upgrade from your Cubase AI version. You may have the pitch correct plugin in Cubase AI, but if you want kind of the graphic tuning, it would be in Cubase Artist or Cubase Pro versions, and you could upgrade to that. All right, so we see Gareth just says kind words about bass line I just recorded, so really enjoyed that song. All right, so I think we are out of questions. May wrap up a little early. We'll see if there's more questions that come in. We'll give it a couple minutes. All right, so we see from Best Green Jesus just says, anyone want to send me all the FX modulator presets? I can't have loop mash /prologue/mystic presets with the new modulator razor presets. So if you want to send me an email, bestkoreanjesus, to clubcubase@steinberg.de, I could see if I could get all the presets sent over to you. So and I could probably duplicate them and do it as a user preset for you really quickly if you want. So again, email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, and I'll see if I can get it compiled for you over the weekend. All right, and we'll see if there's more questions coming. Give it a couple minutes. I know there's usually a delay from when I talk to when you guys hear. Yeah, it's great to see Best Korean Jesus back. Yeah, so yeah, I don't mind doing the presets for you if you want. So, all right. So Benny just asked, Greg, do you know where I can get ready presets for Stream Deck XL for Cubase? So I think that there is like a Slideshow FX has kind of a Cubase one that they sell. But there's probably other ones floating around. I think it's like $35 or something like that. And the guy did a really good job getting kind of all the icons and stuff like that. All right, so we see Gareth just saying, not sure yet, but may have another tune prep this weekend. So yeah, be happy to play bass on it. Okay, so we see from Tommy C asks, Greg, how do I swallow one truck? I guess solo one track. Sometimes I need to solo one track while others are muted, and I can't get that to happen. Thanks. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's take kind of a typical multi-track scenario. And let's say I have just drums. I will come over here. I have bass and guitars muted, so we should basically only hear drums. And I want to solo the track, let's say my kick. And now when I unsolo, everything is still. So let's come over here, say, okay, I want to solo the snare. So those tracks, sometimes when you solo one track while others are muted, I can't get that to happen. Thanks. So just looks like that is kind of working as expected. Let me know, Tommy, if I'm doing anything. So all tracks are muted. Now when I unsolo, the tracks that were muted previous to soloing the track are still muted. So let me know if I'm doing something differently than you. All right, Jay from Secret Studios asks, is it possible to use Cubase Project Logical editors within Wavelab via ARE2? So, think of Wavelab as an audio editor. So it's just going to edit that particular event that we launched. So I don't think it's really going to ARA function, that the Project Logical editor for naming or stuff like that is going to translate over to Wavelab. It's still going to be kind of, controlling functions and events within Cubase. All right, Sasu asks, please help. I had my remote mapping done in 12 Pro. I reinstalled my computer and copied Cubase 12 folder from my old machine to the new machine, but now remote mappings are gone. Okay, so if you want to see like where your MIDI remote mappings are, like on your old machine, let's come over to the MIDI remote. Let's go like to the settings here. And then you'll see scripts. So here you could actually, at this point, so let's say I made this script for the P4. I will enable this particular script. And at this point, you could see the script path right here. So as soon as you come, so go to, so right, so we'll go from start. So you'll see the settings window, then go to scripts, and then even from your Cubase 12, just click on your old machine. You could export the script and send it, send this file, email it to yourself. But they're all right there. And as you see the scripts, you want to click on the scripts tab. You could see, the name of it, the script folder, where the path is, and, just export script and email it to yourself if you need to. So let me know if you still have the old computer. You should be able to just get those scripts directly off right there. Okay. Okay, so you see Best Green Jesus has been actively lurking without many questions. But you have to come and say hi because everyone will miss you otherwise. So. Okay, so we see question, Greg, how do you blow up a MIDI drum track into individual MIDI tracks for each note quickly? Okay, so there is a explode function. I think it's what it's called. We'll come over. All right, so we have multiple drum sounds here. So we look at our kit. All right, so we have, multiple sounds right here. So let's say we wanted to now turn these individual drum events into separate tracks. So we're going to select the MIDI event here. Go to your MIDI menu and you'll see dissolve part. And then we want to separate pitches. We can separate channels if you have like a MIDI file or parts that are multiple MIDI channels, but now you can just come over here, separate pitches, and now the kick, snare, hi-hat, they're all on their own individual lanes, their own individual tracks right here. So again, just come over, undo that particular function, select the drum event that has multiple notes, go to MIDI to dissolve part, separate pitches, process, and you're all set. Let's see, Michael Teams just says, it's Sable, check out the band Yellow. So one guy's 68, the other guy's 75. Yeah. One of the guys who used to work at Euphonics was kind of involved with a lot of their engineering stuff of their song that was used in all the movies. All right. All right, let's see if there's any other questions that sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. Just wait just a couple minutes. All right, so you see Soren just asked, Greg, did you skip my question or have I missed it about Wavelab rainbow spectrogram to hunt sibilances? So I think I may have missed it. Sorry if I did, but I'll show it real quick in Wavelab. So let's say if I have, I'll just open a file here quickly. So let's say I have a voiceover file like this.
In language, infinitely many words can be written with a small set of letters. In arithmetic, infinitely many numbers can be composed from just a few digits with the help of the symbol 0, the principle of position, and the concept of base.
So a lot of sibilance issues there. So if we wanted to detect the sibilance quickly using kind of the new rainbow waveforms. So, while it looks like, maybe it's kind of gimmicky, but this is like so fast for when we click on the rainbow, we see this little settings wheel here, and we'll edit the settings. So here we could pick, particular frequency ranges that we want to be highlighted. So, by default, it'll often be just set up for sibilances. So as we look at this file here, we could see...
In language, infinitely many words can be written with a small set of letters. In arithmetic,
so where we see the
infinitely
yellow,
many numbers can be composed from just a few digits with the help of the symbol 0, the principle of position, and the concept of base.
So anywhere that you see kind of the bright yellow, that's where the sibilances are. So such a fast tool for something that's always, problematic, and just gives you kind of a really, a unique perspective without having to always listen to it, just visually representing where the sibilances are inside of a file with Wavelab. So let me know if that's your question. Sorry if I missed it. Right. Jazz dudes calling yellow the Swiss brothers of Kraftwerk. That's a good description. All right, so we'll see if there's more questions that sneak in. If not, we'll give it another minute. We see Michael Team says that he's Texas nobility, that he got crowned by a cow patty once. That's so Texas. It's great. All right. So Soren, let me know if that makes sense for what you wanted to see. Sorry if I missed your question. Kara's saying, arise, Sir Michael. So, all right. Okay, so I guess we are out of questions. I'll wait another couple of seconds. And we'll see. Go ahead and wrap up. So thanks for spending part of your morning, evening, afternoon learning more about Steinberg products. We'll be here on Tuesday. You could always send questions to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Appreciate everyone just learning more about Steinberg products. And, again, send questions in advance. Let your friends know. Appreciate everyone. I have such gratitude that I'm able to be a part of the community and help people. And we'll see everyone back on Tuesday. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy. And we'll see you back on Tuesday. Take care.